Okay, everybody, good morning. We are ready to go here today. Very excited to speak with you. We've got some great things we're going to do today. First thing I want to do is get you all set up for another great week in our investing here. But I got to talk to you real quickly about a couple of things. We want to make sure that things are going well for you. Last week, we talked about the foundation to success. We talked about your red button statements. We've got some fantastic information we're going to share with you today on finding properties using competing and non-competing methods. And we'll also get into maybe a little bit of deal evaluation as well. But we've got plenty of ground to cover. But I want to ask you some hard-hitting questions. And before we do that, we're going to go ahead and just do a really brief review of what we went through last week so we can solidify that, because last week is monumental. It's crucial. If you remember, when we talk about real estate investing, there's a couple of really important things. I want to ask you in the context of your start in this system. Remember, I go around the country, people ask me all the time, what's the difference between successful and unsuccessful students? Vision, systems, and leverage. Do you have vision, systems, and leverage? And I want you to get out some paper and pen. I want you to take some notes and write this down, because I've already got 7 things on a homework assignment I want you to send me. And we're going to get you that right after the webinar is over. Now, as a reminder, during the event, if you have any questions for me or you want to talk about anything after the event is over, I'm going to be taking a look at emails at, go ahead and email me at michael23watson@gmail.com. michael23watson@gmail.com. Submit an email to me and I'll answer any questions that we have if we have time at the end, which I think we will. But again, how has your vision changed? Has your vision changed? See, here's the problem with seminars, and this is one of the reasons we kept going out to the hallway, and I was so excited, is you guys think a certain way, you act a certain way, you live a certain way, and until you change that, nothing else around you is going to change. And so we want to push hard. We got to have a different vision for life. The next thing is systems. You need to start putting systems in place. The systems that should be in place right now are number 1, the area of expertise book. Number 2, driving and working the area of expertise with your city and county offices. Number 3, those of you that have access to the MLS, you should have several dozen MLS searches already saved and producing results for you. So those are important. The next thing is leverage. Who are you leveraging? What are you doing? And leverage starts with power teams. That's also a system. That's also a part of your vision. You got to get people involved around you, because here's the thing. If you try to do this alone, it's very difficult. You have to recruit other people. Now, if you remember, for me, there was so much activity I was doing that people were gravitating towards me naturally because of the closings, the number of properties I was buying, selling, closing, the title company, the lenders, the appraisers, the home inspectors, all of these guys, contractors, subcontractors, all of these guys and property managers were working on my properties and my efforts as a natural course of my business. And these people look to me like people I could leverage. And so you need to ask yourself, are you leveraging? Who have you talked to? Have you started on your power team? What people do you have? Have you had a power team meeting yet? So again, we want you to keep practicing your new mantra, one thing, one time. Now, again, the goal here is to master the foundation of success. First thing you want to do is do one thing, one time. Start to build power teams. Find something that moves you deeply. Are you moved? Are you doing anything differently? Have you, let me ask you this. So this is the first hard question for today. Did you go to the event, get all excited, go home, stub your toe for a minute, and then quit, or greatly ramp down on some of the things you were doing? Or are you going full steam ahead? And that's the difference between someone who's found themselves that moves something, they found themselves a thing that moves them deeply, and someone that hasn't. So ask yourself that question. You know, we're going to be in a 2-day camp here soon, so that's very important that you get back there and we have that success and get you lit and excited and answer any questions you have. One of the reasons I set the program up this way so that we can have constant contact, we can talk to each other constantly, so that we have all those things moving forward. Now, just a real quick review of last week, foundation to success, and this is something we had to review every time we ever speak. Got to know the foundation to success. You got to memorize it. Wonder how many of you could memorize it and could talk about it right now. Number 2, find your red button statement. This is your why and your who. So I want to give you a homework assignment. Write this down. I want you to send me your red button statements, your why and your who. I want to make sure these are powerful enough. They've moved you. Why must you do this? Who must you do this before? This is leverage at its best. Got to leverage yourself. Now, today we're going to talk about number 3, begin to find properties using competing and non-competing methods. This is fantastic stuff. We're going to analyze these properties for their highest and best use and future potential. We'll write offers with them using the 2 OPMs. and the OPMs are other people's money and other people's mortgages. We're going to put the property back up for sale as a potential flip, fixer, or flixer. If you don't know what a flixer is yet, that you're new to this, don't worry, we'll get there. Then last, we're going to create and enhance, or next, we're going to create and enhance equity, and that's going to be the change in the value of the property. Instead of sitting there and hoping the property goes up in value over time, we're going to make sure we change the value of the property so that that value of the property changes dramatically so we can make a profit in the short term. Otherwise, you're left with either buying property at a 60, 70 cents on the dollar or less, beating people up, taking away whatever they have in their property because of their misfortune, their problems, their issues, and then hoping after you spend a bunch of money on carpet and paint that you can put it back up for sale and sell it for a profit. So we want to get away from that. Now, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. You shouldn't do it if you come across one of those deals. I'm just saying, hey, there's some really cool things here that we want to make sure we get done. So we want to realize the vision from step 4. That's what we're going to do in analyzing the property. Next, we're going to either sell for a profit or we're going to refinance for an equity position. Again, and we're going to sell for a profit. We put the property up for sale while we start to work. If it sells for a profit, great. Hey, we're all about profits. Quick money's good. But, you know, we want to make sure we price it correctly. So if it doesn't sell for a profit, then we can long-term it for an equity position, cash flow, depreciation, tax benefits, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of great things that happen either way. So people ask me all the time, which one's better? And I say, yes. Well, no, really, Mike, which one's better, 8 or 9? And the answer is exactly. So whatever happens there is great. And the next thing we want to do is prosper. We're going to prosper greatly. Again, this formula lends itself perfectly for a deal evaluation strategy. Nobody evaluates a deal like I do, that we'll have to study more later. Everything must work in the short term and the long term. If not, we don't do the deal, period. We don't do the deal. Do not do the deal. Now, real quick review, red button and statement. Why are you doing this? Who are you doing it for? Write your statement. I want you to send it in to me, and I want to make sure it's powerful. In fact, I'm going to probably take some time this week and talk to all the students and get into them and say, hey, listen, here's where we're at. Here's what we're doing. Let's get this going. Let's get this started. Let's make sure you're passionate enough about this to make some changes, because if you're not passionate, you won't make changes. And we want to make sure that you do that. So again, the why, the who, this is all in your notes. This is in the PowerPoint presentation here. You've got this. Get them into me. So here's my life's red button statements. Great stuff. You start your statements. Really dig into this. Talk to somebody. Talk to somebody that knows you, that loves you. Ask them, hey, when I'm talking about this, watch me explain this. Do I feel really passionate about this, or am I just kind of just writing this to feel good about myself? So there is a big difference there. Now, what I want to do is talk about non-competing methods for property location, but I got to tell you 2 really quick stories before we get involved with this, because there are some other things we want you to write down on this note here. There's some fantastic things. So one of my students from Southern California reached out to me. Gosh, he came to his first event with me, I'm guessing 11, 12 years ago. Came to his first event, got right out of the chute. Guy did some amazing things right away and fantastic benefits for him. And in fact, he had so much success that he loved doing this on a high level. And let me write you some of the things that he said. Mike Watson has truly blown my mind. He's one of the premier practitioners and educators of our time on all facets of real estate investing. I found many properties, done deals already. These are easier to find than I ever thought possible. Get going. So great commentary from him. I loved talking to him. Now, one of the things that was interesting was, you know, I asked him, so it's been a few years, what have you taken away from my courses? And he goes, man, I got to get back in it. I did some great things, you know, awesome stuff. He goes, one thing I've been doing, just kind of playing around. He goes, I get on Google Maps and I search for properties that define what you're looking for. And I said, well, tell me what your search methods are, knowing obviously what they should be, knowing what I taught him, knowing the deals that he had found before. And he goes, Mike, I live in Southern California, and there's a lot of areas, believe it or not, that are like what you say. And I just get on Google Maps and I go to my area of expertise and I start taking map pictures of where we take big area photographs of, or on Google Maps, big area views of cities where they have the older homes and larger lots. Now, the first thing I've started asking myself in compiling a list, and I said, you have a list? And he goes, Mike, I have a list of over 100 properties. I have a list of over 100 properties that have 2 or 3 criteria that are pretty cool. So guys, I want you to write this down, because this is this easy. This guy gets on the map and he goes, well, the first thing I do is look for the older homes in the larger areas, larger subdivisions, larger lots. And then I just start going through the neighborhoods from a aerial view. And I said, great, that's perfect. I remember teaching you that. Fantastic. I go, what's next? And he goes, well, there's a couple things I find. I find areas that have flag lots. Now, again, that's a house behind a house where we have a long driveway down one side and there's a second lot. I look for houses with large lots, have really large lots in areas where you can see duplexes or fourplex from the sky view, also the aerial view. And then I look for lots that go from one street to the next, meaning the house faces Jones Street, and then the backyard goes all the way back to Jackson Street on the other side. So literally, you could access this person's property from two sides. Or he said, I look for properties that have alleys down the middle of the lots. Now, there's not a lot of these in Utah, but there are a lot of markets out there where they have alleys. So some subdivisions, everybody wanted an access to the back of their lot. So there's an easement on an alley that everybody shares. You can drive into the back of your lot if you choose to. Because I look for those too, because those alleys are sometimes large enough to create a street and have a drive-through. And I go, so you're looking for properties that have multifamily properties in the neighborhood, larger lots, older homes, lots that touch both streets, lots that have two properties on them, meaning two houses, two duplexes, two fourplexes, or lots that are big enough to touch from street to street. And he goes, yeah, that's what I'm doing. And I go, and you have over 100 of those. And he goes, yeah, I do. I have over 100 of them. I go, well, what are you doing, man? You need to get back to why you're doing this. Well, interestingly enough for him, he goes, well, let me tell you the coolest thing I learned at your seminars, Mike. He goes, you knew that I was doing deals right away, so you kept making me get up and talk about the deals I was doing, as you did with everyone. But one of the things I learned is that I could speak in front of people. Some of your events were 200, 300, 400 people that I went to, and I got up there, even if it was for a minute or 2, 3 minutes, and explained deals and had you ask me questions. I got really excited about that. And he goes, you might not know this, but I was really studying your speaking techniques and how you did that. And I'm a professional speaker now. I've started some insurance businesses, and I've got some great things going. We've got a door knocking crew. I speak on a regular basis. I get paid to speak on a regular basis, and I owe it all to you. And I said, well, that's great. I love that you got those gifts. And I always recognize you as someone that had a lot of potential and were very talented. But let's go back to that list. So 2 things that stick out to me. You got some door knockers. And he goes, yeah, we do some really cool insurance products, and we knock doors. And a lot of these are in areas where these would be specific for properties. And I go, and are you making a list? If you touch your door knockers, what to look for when they're out walking around? And he goes, no, but I'm working on that right away. And I go, great. And I go, so you got this list. What are you doing? He goes, well, actually, I stopped and talked to one of the people last week, and there's an old lady that owns a huge lot with a smaller, older house, and I think I could get her to sell. I need to get going again. So I was very excited to hear that, because he talked in great detail right there about non-competing methods for property location. You know how many people are out doing what he just mentioned right there? Do you know how many people that come to my courses are out doing what he just mentioned right there? And that is just the coolest formula right there for doing that. So I said to him, dude, you better get some of those properties. And if you're not going to get me get some of those properties going for yourself, you need to send me that list so I can at least review your data. And he laughed and laughed, because he knew that what I meant was send me the list and I'll do the properties if you're not going to do the properties. Now, of course, if he did that, I'd work with him and we'd set up some partnerships. But man, this guy did deal after deal. He made an enormous amount of money. He's very successful now. He's doing really well in his business, but he's got this looming question in front of him. He knows there's properties available. He knows how to find them. He's got a list of them. They've worked in the past. Oh, and the other one I didn't even mention to you that he adds to his list is he has properties that people own that you can tell where someone thinks it's a larger lot. If you looked at their house, for example, from the street, it would just look like a house with a larger lot, but it's actually 2 lots. So some of those that go from the front of the house is at Jones Street and the back of the house is at Jackson Street. That's one big lot, and he's got that listed. Others, he's gone and driven the area just in the course of his life, because that's where a good area of expertise is somewhere around your life. He actually has found that some of those that look like that are actually subdivided separate lots in the back of the property. So he has properties where he could literally walk into somebody and say, hey, sell me your back lot. If you don't want to sell your house, you don't want to sell all of it, sell the back lot. And these are in areas, again, that allow duplexes, twin homes, small PUDs, or small 4, 6, 8 unit condo projects. Great, great stuff. And again, this is infill. An infill technique is when we fill in the larger, older lots, or it could be known as a redevelopment area. Because a lot of times people don't take care of those bigger lots. Now in Southern California, where properties are very, very expensive, more often than other areas, at least in nicer traditional areas that are older, they take good care of them. But if you get into those inner cities, and I don't want to say we're in a war zone, but you get in the inner cities, the lots just aren't taken care of. So that's number one. That's an example of some non-competing methods. Number two, had a buddy of mine who's coming to our courses in April, at the April 27th, on Thursday, April 29th, on Saturday, 2-day course. And he happened to go to Vegas. And I sent him an email or a text. I don't remember how we communicated, but I said to him, dude, there's some deals down there I want you to check out. And I'm going to send you some property addresses. I want you to go by and take a look at them. And let me know where they're at in this stage. Because I found some properties years ago, bought them. Again, these were larger lots, great zoning, had some incentives from the city. And again, this is all important that we know these things, because this is where we're going to start the non-competing methods. We don't just pick some random neighborhood and start driving around. We want to find some great areas. So these were great areas 10 years ago when I did one of my events down there. And I was really curious. I did 3 properties with a gal within 300 yards of each other. And I said, I want you to drive and just see what happened. Because a lot of times the vision that you have for a property, just because you expose it to someone and sell them the property, doesn't mean they're going to follow through with it. And right after this time is when that big real estate market crashed. We don't know who did what and how it worked. So sure enough, I tell him I'm going to do that. Well, he's down there a few days and he's getting a little excited, just like everybody. And the guy starts sending me properties that he found, properties that had corner lots with boarded up homes next to vacant lots in nice areas. He sent me some links to some mobile home parks. Mobile home parks are fantastic. So these are great deals. And this is just him driving around in Las Vegas. He's not from Las Vegas. He doesn't live in Las Vegas. He's never lived permanently in Las Vegas. And he's down there finding great stuff, sending it up here. And I said, man, this guy's going to be good if he'll follow through with it and be excited about what he's doing, because he's sure sending me some great stuff. Well, sure enough, he finds this really cool aerial tool for Las Vegas for property, looking at the names, the plats, those types of things, sends it to me. And I look up these 3 properties, and he drives by them. I believe he drove by them, but he sent me the link. And of these 3 properties, it had great higher and better uses. From 10 years ago, only one of the 3 had a development on it. And the one was done last year. So it was just barely done. And it was a really nice project, exactly what I had designed it to be, exactly how we sold it. Somebody did a great project there. It's really cool, really, really interesting. But the other 2 were not done that way. So immediately I'm saying to myself, gosh, I got to get back and contact those people and see if they're interested in doing that. Because we're going to be in Vegas probably in September. We'll be down at the Vegas event. Now, so that's another cool thing is, again, you don't have to be highly skilled. You don't have to be intense. You don't have to be fantastic at and know 1,000 things about this business to do what I've just described so far. So again, non-competing methods for property location as a technique are simply going to be, we're looking for properties that have higher and better uses in areas where there might be some infill and redevelopment strategies, benefits, or bonuses. Now again, if we look at it from the city's point of view, if they've got an area of the city that has older homes, larger lots, a lot of these larger lots in the older areas don't get taken care of. They have weeds, they have junk on them, they just don't look great. And these lots are just sitting there. They're not changing. So what the city will come in and do is they'll offer zoning incentives for someone like you or I to come in and take those houses out and redevelop them, or take the larger lots and do something with them and fill them in. So it's like filling in the blanks, like utilizing all the land in a higher and better use. So we want to find those areas. So that's what we're looking for here. Now, again, you have to understand the highest and best use. We drive around, we look at that blank lot, we look at that house that has the big lot, and we say to ourselves, this is not the highest and best use of the property. Okay, I need to tear this house out and build a duplex, a twin home, a condo conversion, a property, a retail, a strip mall, a retail office, a strip mall. Any of those things right there are going to be fantastic benefits for us. So we're going to start with those things. but you have to find the right areas. So now, assuming that we found the right areas, I want to talk about some non-competing methods for property location. Now, before we do that again, I want to show you one other cool tool. It happens to be spring break for my kids here, and later in the day, just yesterday, we drove to another city called Pleasant Grove, and we were going to drive up to the canyon there. We have some really beautiful mountains right there, and there's a little hike that we were going to do called Battle Creek Hike. And as we were driving, we turned on the wrong street. I thought I remembered how to get there. We've done the hike a few times. I turned on the wrong street. And so I was in an area that was very close to where I needed to be, but not in an area where I was exactly where I was sure. So I turn on the street and I take a look around. I've got my son, my daughter, and my wife in the car. And I'm driving down the street and I'm looking, I'm like, gosh, these are bigger. Look at that lot. Look at the size of that lot. That's a home right there that was built in 1904. And I know because I stopped and talked to the homeowner. But 1904 on a 0.66 acre lot, corner lot, frontage on one side, frontage on the other, a 0.66 acre lot. Now the lot behind it was a 0.66 acre lot, older home, probably built around 1905, 1910, in terrible shape. Wasn't sure if someone was even living there or not. And these two lots on two corners, so back-to-back corners, spanned an entire block. Now in Utah, a block is a tenth of a mile typically. So if you have two properties that go a whole block, you've got quite a bit of distance there, and probably close to at least 500 feet of frontage, depending on the width of the lot, of course, too. So there's 400 feet of frontage. There's a lot of frontage there, and then that's just on the one side, and then each of these properties will have frontage on the other side. Now, the reason we like corner lots so much, you don't have to have a corner lot, is they have access on both sides. So if you're doing a project and a fire truck needs to pull in and pull out, it's easy for them to just drive down one side and out the other. And corner lots lend themselves nicely for that. Corner lots also lend themselves nicely for lot subdivisions, because you can have a lot facing one side, cut the other lot in the back, and it faces the other side. And you have frontage on both sides for both lots. So really juicy area. Well, I turn my head to the left, and I notice, oh my gosh, there's a vacant home. So this is the second vacant home I've seen in 200 yards. I drive down the street and I pull over the car. I'm taking pictures. I'm writing down addresses. I'm taking street signs, and I'm telling my son, see, son, that's what a vacant and distressed home looks like. And in this one home, there was actually a no trespassing sign in it. It looked like one of the windows were broken. Everybody says, I can't find these homes, Well, we drove down the street further. There was another vacant home, turned left to go on the street we were supposed to be on, a third vacant home, and distressed, all three distressed and vacant homes. Looked like they hadn't been lived in years, in less than 300 yards. And the other thing was there was these big, huge lots. So I'm getting excited, and my wife's like, hey, it's going to get late if we don't get going. Let's head up to the hike. So we go up and hike, and we're doing the family hike, and I'm really excited about that. And I'm thinking about that while we're hiking. We come back down, and she goes, well, let's go to the park down in town. So just so happened I had to go past that area again. So I turned back into that same neighborhood. And again, this is an area I've driven a few times over my career, but I hadn't driven these particular streets, which is an example of why we need to drive different ways to everywhere that we go. So we get to see properties all over the place. So I drive back into the neighborhood, and the first thing I see is a for sale by owner. I immediately call it, ladies for sale, very excited to sell. Unfortunately, she's not one of the bigger lots in the area. It's a 0.16 acre lot. And then I curl back around to that street where we were at, where all those great homes were. And by the way, it wasn't just this one street. It was street after street after street of these. And I pull over, and the big house that was built in 1904 on the corner, or I should say the house on the 0.66 acre lot, guy's out front talking. And I just pull over, jump out of my car, and go start talking to him. I say, hey, what's the deal on this? He goes, well, I'm actually renting it. My parents own it. We like it. I'm in the area to go to school, but we like it here, but I'm sure my dad's considered selling. So I get his dad's name and number, call him. He goes, yeah, we thought about selling, but my son likes it there. And we're just going to decide what we do as we go. But there's enough land there that I could subdivide something off the lot, something off the back there, if you're interested in having another lot. And I thought, gosh, worst case, I could get this guy to subdivide a piece off the back. Get the other corner lot that's vacant potentially, I could have a nice corner project there. So I'm writing all the information down. I call his dad. His dad said, yeah, I'm open to it. I said, well, let me do this, because the one thing I didn't know was the zoning. I just lucked into this neighborhood, didn't know the zoning, didn't know the incentives, didn't know the development standards, but there were properties everywhere. So I call the for sale by owner, I call this, and my family's just sitting there watching it. And you can tell that's not what they had set out to do. So I'm certainly going to go back there, but this doesn't have to be any more difficult than this. And I want to show you what this neighborhood looks like, so you can kind of start seeing where you need to be looking. And then we'll talk about some of the things we're going to do to identify these properties in a better way. So let me switch my screen to this area. Now, one of the tools we have here in Utah County, if you work Utah County at all, if you go to utahcounty.gov/online services, there's some really great options here. So if you come here, and a lot of counties, a lot of areas have things like this. If you just go right here to parcel map, and you might want to make sure if you're watching this video that it's on full screen so you can see some of the smaller information here. But this is just on parcel map right here. You'll notice parcel map, parcel information map. So it's just utahcounty.gov. So you click on the parcel map, and then you come over here. So I'm finding this. Now, here's the city of Pleasant Grove. And again, I'll zoom in on this. But you look at this, and if you're looking at this right here, I don't know how well you can tell this from the screen, but you can start to see different things as you take a look at this area. So let me give you an example. If you look in this area over here, we've got bigger homes on smaller lots. This is not particularly interesting. This is not an area I would look for. This is not an area I'd want to work in. This is not an area of expertise, so to speak. So I would probably be interested in not working that area right here. But the interesting part about this is if you go simply across the street in one direction or the other, get rid of that there, if you go across the street right here, look at this section. So these are sections right here that have larger lots and probably older homes. Now, the other thing that jumps out here is there's some unique zoning things. If you can see my arrow right here, this is a flag lot. So there's a flag lot right here. So I know there's probably zoning in place for a flag lot. This is a bigger lot. This is a corner lot that someone actually probably at some point subdivided off. Look at how this lot line curves. Then you got another flag lot over here and it looks like 3 lots that don't have anything built on them. Then we have a trap lot. There's a lot back here that's landlocked. So somebody's put an access here. There's 2 things here, and you can go and pick up this lot for cheap. This is infill. Look at this over here. Someone's done the same thing where they put in their own road. And this starts to get a little more interesting where I'm starting to ask more questions. Now, these lots right here, again, these are bigger homes on smaller lots, not typically interested in those types of things. But if you come over here again, look at this area right here. Just looking at a plat map, this is how my buddy in Southern California put together this list of 100 plus properties. Look at this one. We got a vacant lot right here. We got a trap lot right here. We got a big flag lot right here. Man, imagine if you could buy this flag lot and then you could go to this person with access and get a really good deal on their property unless they have an easement somewhere else, which might be what this is right here. But again, we're looking at these properties. Looks like another vacant lot here. Somebody's done kind of a cool project here. They had a big lot. Somebody dropped in a drive to 3 homes. This is a textbook project that I'd look at and say, how do I do that? Now you look at these 2 lots, big lots with a home on them. I guarantee these are probably older lots with a barn in the back. And driving this area was certainly like that. Now let's come to the area that I found, and I'll show you just how cool this area looked. Because this is what you want to start looking for. And then we're going to teach you some of the non-competing techniques that we're gonna do. So I'm driving and I'm going to what I think is this hike. Get this a little bigger here. And I'm coming down 100 North, and I was actually not in the right area. I was supposed to be on 100 South. And then I realized I'm not in the right spot because I can see the school ahead. So I turned down this street right here. And all of a sudden, look what's jumping out at me. Look at this lot right here that goes from street to street. Look at these 2 corner lots that face each other. Those are probably at least going to be 1/2 to 3/4 of an acre each. These are older homes. And the reason you can tell that is there's a lot of these little buildings in the back are usually their old sheds, old barns. But I'm coming down this street, and this home's vacant right here. I'm like, man, I believe it was this one right here that was vacant. It had the no trespassing sign, or maybe it was 1 block down. And I'm coming down here. Look at these 2 properties. Imagine if you bought both of those, the project you could put together. And even if you picked up this one, this guy, I would guarantee you, this guy probably owns these two lots. Those don't look big enough to be homes. Those are probably just little outbuildings on this lot right here. But if you bought these two and this one, I mean, you got lots of options here. If you bought this property right here and this property, you'd have access from both streets. Then you come down here, and this is where I really started getting crazy. This is the house that looked like it was vacant. And look at the size of this lot. It has frontage along Center Street. It has frontage along 200 East. And at this point, I'm just licking my lips. Licking my lips. These two properties are huge. What's this right here? Is this a lot? Is this an easement? What if this is probably not big enough to build on, but if I bought this property, I could probably pick up this one for a song and have, again, access both ways, which makes developing much, much easier. Now, this is the lot right here, 0.66 acre lot. This one right here that I got really excited about, the home was built in 1904, older home. Look across the street here. Older home, huge lot. These guys have an enormous amount of frontage. And then you look at the properties here, and I'm just like, this is just a gold mine. So this is what we want to start looking for, these types of areas. Where you come down this street again. So I'm heading down to where I'm supposed to be. And again, look at the stuff here. Now, here's another project. Look right here, over here, where somebody did a flag lot. So this home in the front, right here, more than likely owned this whole thing, and at some point they put in an access back here to another property. But again, you can literally start going on properties like this and see things like this, and these types of properties are everywhere and all over the place. And if you look even in the general area here, fantastic stuff. So again, this is one of the areas. Now again, I got to be honest with you, I had not checked the zoning. I was in short time. I'm going to go back, I'm going to look at the zoning, and I'm very excited about what might happen here. So this is how we start breaking down. Now, my buddy in Southern California, this is all he does. Now, I think he probably does the satellite view here, which is great. The satellite view is great. I like to see these because it actually shows the lot lines. And then I'll switch to satellite view to see exactly what is on the project itself. But you can do that very easily. So good stuff there. So you can come over here very easily and start saying, hey, gosh, let's take a look at this and look how cool some of this stuff is. And again, as you do this, things start jumping out at you, and you get really excited to come in and do these properties right here. So let's go to these two properties that got me really excited and see how they look from the satellite. So again, here's this older home. This one right here, built in 1904. This one right here, probably built at the same time. Look at the size of these lots. And this one too. And this is a parking lot. So this is a parking lot for this building right here. But, you know, I've worked in, depending on if it looks like there's stalls. There's lots of angles you can take with them. But again, this is the type of stuff you want to start looking for. Now, if we switch back over to our what we're going to be doing with competing and non-competing methods, what we've just shown you how to do is to find the right type of area. And again, I don't know the zoning yet. We want to make sure there's zoning there, but typically those older homes, larger lots, those areas, some better opportunities. And then we'll get to the deal evaluation schedule. So let's assume we have our area of expertise set up. And now we're going to start these campaigns, the campaign of door knocking. Now, door knocking for me isn't I go to an area and I knock up one side and knock down the other. Sometimes I'll do that. For example, I had a subdivision, probably 100 homes built in the 1940s, and these were 2-bedroom, 1-bath on basements. Now, interestingly enough, 70 years ago, homes were built, you would think all the basements would be finished. Only about 60% of them, 70% of them were finished. So what we did was we went in and we started looking and knocking for whole neighborhoods where we were looking for unfinished basements. Because if you sell a house, it's a 2-bedroom, 1-bath, that's kind of functionally obsolescent. There's not a lot of people that want to own a 2-bedroom, 1-bath. But by finishing the basement, you could add another 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, and a second family room. So now it becomes a 4-bedroom, 2-bath, which is much more marketable. We actually purchased one of those in there, and for $17,000, finished the basement. And it added an enormous amount of value, going from a 2-1, imagine this, a 2-1 to a 4-2 for $17,000, plus it was a remodel upstairs. It was a really, really cool project, sold very quickly, made about a $25,000 profit. Again, that sounds like an awful lot like a carpet and paint fixer-upper, and you can call it that if you want. I would look at it more as a square footage fixer-upper. We're using the basement. Also look at it as a functional obsolescence fixer-upper, going from a 2-1 to a 4-2. Nice deal, and we liked it. It was simple, easy, quick, so we knocked that entire area to find some other deals. So door knocking doesn't consist necessarily of going to every single home, but what we want to do is just do what I did. I was driving down the street that second time after we went hiking, and there the guy is out working in his yard. I stopped the car, hop out, and I asked him, hey, you interested in selling? Look at that big lot. Hey, is this a separate lot? Do you know who owns the lot? Do you know anybody around here that's interested in selling? He goes, gosh, my dad owns a lot. It goes to the middle here, and he has thought about selling. And I said, can I get his number? I'd love to chat with him. He goes, absolutely, here it is. Gave me his number, and I called, and before I'm in my car leaving, I'm on the phone with his dad. Dad happens to be an attorney, so he understands easily enough how to, what he called, parse out a lot there. We can parcel that out and subdivide it out. But that's door knocking. We're in an area with great potential. I'm not knocking on every house. I'm knocking on the ones that look appealing. Now, if I've got a vacant home like the 3 I found yesterday, of course I'm going to knock on all the homes around it, because one of those people is probably going to know where the owner is. So that's important to me as well. Because unless you want to just get the information off the parcel and either drive, if they're local, drive to them, or mail if they're not local, it's going to be hard to find those owners. But typically a neighbor has contact information and kind of watches the property for them. So these are the top two here: knocking, door knocking, driving around. The neighborhood dissemination is kind of what I just showed you. You're driving through, and what jumps out at you? Bigger lots, older homes. And then the other thing that jumps out at you is projects. Again, remember the laws of mimicry. If I see a project that's been done, I want to do that too. Let's do that project. So we want to get these neighborhoods. We want to break them down. We want to find competing and non-competing. These are non-competing methods. There was no properties for sale there except for the one for sale by owner. There were no listed properties that I had any interest in. There was 1 or 2 that had listings, but they weren't. There were the smaller lots in the area. So we're going to break that neighborhood dissemination. We're going to break that neighborhood down. Now, next thing we're going to do is talk about power teams. These are the people that are in and around these areas all the time and are looking for these. Do I have any people that are in this area? Now, again, this happened to be an area that I wasn't working all the time. In fact, Pleasant Grove City, truth be told, I've only done 4 deals in my career there. So we actually bought a 4-plex years ago, brand new 4-plex build, and then we subdivided it into four condos and then sold them individually. And so I ended up being the agent on the sale and one of the investors, and I was the lead on subdividing those out. So power teams, we want to get that done. Again, the non-competing methods, the area of expertise. By definition, this is an area where you want to specialize in. 1 mile by 1 mile, 2 miles by 2 miles. You want to make sure it has 4 to 5 to 6 different zones, because where those zones transition, that's where the city can make the case of allowing different things that may not allow in one big open zone of the same kind. If you go in the middle of a large 1-zone area and try to change something, they're going to be like, nah, this whole area is this way. But if you go into another area that has 4 to 6 zone changes in a short area, then the city says, well, gosh, we have lots of options here. If it fits the neighborhood, then they might consider it differently. Okay, and then we're going to use our core clients and sphere of influence. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. Our core clients are the people we're working with on a regular basis. Now, these aren't going to necessarily help us in our area of expertise or in these top areas, but if we teach our clients what we're looking for and the people around us what we're looking for, you'd be surprised how many people will call you and tell you about deals. I can't tell you how many people over the years know that I did real estate investing, and I'd see them at church on Sunday, or I'd run into them at an event with the kids or somewhere, and they'd come up to me and say, dude, I found a really distressed property. I wanted to give you the address and let you know. Let me know how it works out. And some of those were great and some of them weren't, but I got people out there looking and talking. The other thing is new realtor advertising. If you're a real estate agent, we'll talk a little bit more about that, but how do you advertise as a realtor? For example, one of the things I do for non-competing methods for property locations, I have a really cool list of properties that basically goes, I will buy your listing if. Now I have a second version of it, I would buy your property if, or I would make an offer on your property if. And basically what I do when I send emails to realtors, my cover sheet has a list at the bottom. I'll buy your listing if, and then it has 20 different ways I can sell or finance, 20 different things. And it's funny that I can't tell you over the years how many clients have said, or how many people I'm talking to would say, I will not sell or finance, I will not sell or finance, I will not sell or finance. And then I hand them this list of I would buy your properties if, and this is realtors, these are brokers, these are clients that are representing themselves. This is Joe Smith, who didn't even know if he was selling, but you knock on his door and he's got a great option. And I will not sell or finance, I will not sell or finance, I will not sell or finance. And the reason they believe that is they don't understand the benefits of seller financing. And then I simply say, okay, I get that you want seller finance, but will you do any one of these things? And then they read my list of 20 different ways to explain seller financing. And then they go, well, I'll do I would consider number 4, 6, 12, and 18. But yeah, I don't come to me with any seller financing. And they don't understand it, but all of those are seller finance. They're a version and a form of seller financing. So as a realtor or a professional, now me, I'm not a realtor, but as I drive around and see people, I hand them a flyer that says, if you're interested in any of these things right here, let me know. And they're all just a varying approach to seller financing. So you can get the OPM, other people's money, other people's mortgages. But again, these are things other people aren't doing. The random people out there, realtors, a realtor might have a farm for listings, but they don't typically have an investing area of expertise. They don't have these things. And this is to make you bigger. Remember we talked about vision, systems, and leverage at the top of the call here? If you don't have vision, systems, and leverage, you don't have anything. And you are just you. And how has things gone for you as being just you, operating alone as you, trying to get excited and motivated as just you, and using all your time and effort? Until you get bigger than yourself, things aren't going to change very quickly. So again, door knocking, driving around, these are the cool things. Now here's some competing methods for property location. Now some might say, well, Mike, why do I want to compete with everyone else? Because again, competing with everyone else can take on a different mindset if we think differently. I'm not going to tell you to do these things like everyone else. Let me give you a couple of quick examples. You look at your MLS. I wonder how many of you have 2 or 3 dozen saved MLS remarks searches. Okay, we're going to get into those here in a minute, but I wouldn't use the MLS and just sit there and randomly look at things. You know, if I find this really cool neighborhood that I just showed you guys, here's this neighborhood right here. Again, I drove around a little bit, and this spans, gosh, it's a whole, I would say, a mile by a mile area. It'd be very easy for me to get the coordinates on these streets and set up an area search. So send me any lists, any listings, any expireds, any of those things in this area, from Jones to Jackson, from 1st to 12th, and I can put that in as a search. And now every time something happens in that area, I get sent an email. I might not go buy the one that's for sale or closing, but I might go buy the one next door and knock on their door. So I can start doing things differently. I don't want you to do things the way you're doing. I want you to do them differently. So we want to make sure that we've got that set up properly moving forward. So those are competing methods with the multiple listing service. Now websites, anywhere that they have properties for sale, we're not going to just get random properties and start making calls. We're going to see how they have search methods. You notice that utahcounty.gov I just showed you? That property, you know how many people access that property and get that information, but how many of them look at it the way I just did? Okay, so that's a competing method with a non-competing mentality, a non-competing approach. If you're not finding properties, you're not going to get excited, you're going to give up. If you're finding properties, there will be nothing that stops you. If you have a great set of properties, and it's like this guy yesterday, I kind of gave him a beating after we were done talking. I said, you know what? How much nerve and guts it must take you to call me and tell me you have 100 properties on a list, a spreadsheet, in areas that do all these things, and you've only talked to a handful of people and you're not making a big effort. And he just started laughing. He goes, you know, Mike, I know. I figured I'd get a little bit of a beating here. And I go, seriously, if you're not going to do it, what you're doing, send it to me. Send me your list, and I'll start working on it with some other people I've got in the area, and we can send you a finder's fee. And of course, this guy is proud enough and very talented, very smart. That was enough to kick him in the butt. And he goes, I'm gonna get some work done. So anything that we do here, courthouse activities, and these are if we find the notice of default list, the tax lien sales, the foreclosures on the courthouse steps, those types of things. Yard signs. Yesterday, I called it for sale by owner yesterday. I try to call almost everyone that I do. And I just asked the lady, because it was in a great area, old house. and how big's your lot? And her lot was not quite big enough to get much done yet. I'm going to look at the zoning in the area. But I called and said, hey, do you know anybody else that's interested in selling? She goes, no. For rents, I always call for rents and just say, I'm calling about your distressed property. What do you mean my distressed property? What's wrong with my property? Oh, well, I just consider any property that's vacant distressed because it's not making any money. And it's you're still paying on it, right? Classified section of the paper. Again, we're looking for things that jump out on us. And these are a lot of different things. So big lot, large home, distressed, TLC needs tender loving care, et cetera, et cetera. Newspaper ads, notice a default list, regular advertising. So anything you're doing as a competing way can take on a different aspect if you're going to think and act differently about it and look at it differently. For example, here's some powerful MLS and advertising search remarks. Again, these are some of the ones that we went over. Some of this is pretty intuitive, but I want to make sure you're doing this because there are some fantastic things that can come out of this. And it's amazing how many of you went home on night one, just the first night of the event, after 12 hours, 9 in the morning till 9 at night, and you guys went home and still came back the next day with some pretty cool stuff. But I didn't say this, and I will now. I was a little unimpressed to how much extent you went to in that moment, because a lot of you came back with, there was probably a dozen deals that I saw that day, and several of you had some similar deals. Now that's going to be true of any situation, but there should have been a lot more variety of deals if you guys had done just a little bit more than just a lots search or a subdivide word search. Now again, to make sure you understand, the MLS, the multiple listing service, allows you to do some really cool searches, and the neat thing I like about it is it allows you to save searches. So as any of these searches come up, like the one I just explained to you in that area in Pleasant Grove, you can do any of these things. TLC, you can search for TLC. That could be a fixer-upper. It could be a tear-out with a big lot. Now, I would do TLC with a larger lot. The TLC in a larger lot, what that means is I can get the house for potentially a cheaper price. I could tear it out. Most of the fixer-uppers I do, guys, are with a track hoe. We just fix the property up by tearing the house out and building something new. So TLC, potential opportunity banks, these are all things that you should be considering. I like seller finance, if you look here, but there's a lot of variations of that. Seller hyphen finance, seller financed with a D. You can just put the word finance. If anybody's got a word finance in their remarks, in their listing, there's going to be some options here. The word carry, zone, zoning. The other one that I don't see here, but we should consider is probably on the next page, is lease option, zone or zoning. I like the word neighbor. Put the word neighbor down if that's not on your list. Neighbor. So neighbor, what that means is, why would somebody put the word neighbor in a property, in a listing? Because something's happened on the neighborhood. So you want to make sure that that happens. Get that neighbor. So again, we're going to take a look at those properties right there. There's all kinds of great words that we can put in and get these. You should have 3 or 4 dozen saved searches. So identify your area of expertise, and then I don't just do some of these searches in my area of expertise. I'll include my area of expertise, but if I know a good city and it has a good zone, I might do a word search in a particular zone that I know is in my area of expertise, so it'll pull anything there. And I'll do that citywide, because if that zone's available anywhere in the city and it has one of these hallmarks to it, a great opportunity to find a property, even if it doesn't happen to be in my area of expertise. So let a system do the work for you. And unless you want to go on every single day and do random searches, which eats up your time and gets distressful and it stops you from doing other things, make it a system. So these are all great things here. A list of the remarks and things we're going to do in the advertising. Great stuff here. Extra room, tenants, short sale, bank approval. And you can see how all of these things right here might have a fantastic opportunity as a part of our campaign, where we're at with the area of expertise. But these are things that can jump out at you anywhere. As is, variance, auction, these are great things to take a look at. all of these words could be in the MLS. They could be on notices, in tax notices, NOD lists. I mean, there's some fantastic things here. And these are non-competing methods. So you want to make sure. Now, we can do some of the other things that other people do. Let me give you a quick example of a property I found. I think I told this story in class, but I knocked on the door and the lady was upset, screamed and yelled at us, "Get off my property. I'm not going to sell my property to you. You guys all want to steal my property." And we were just knocking in an area because she was in a great zone with a large lot. And came to find out that her house was in default. She had a foreclosure sale coming up the next week, in about 8 days. And everybody was coming through trying to lowball her property. Now, I don't work typically NOD lists, notice of default list, foreclosure list, tax lien list. I typically don't because there's all that pressure. Now, in this particular one, it happened to be in a fantastic area. So, of course, we bought the property, made, gosh, 60, 70,000 bucks in under 100 days. It was a great deal. Didn't even really do anything. The property didn't even go in, so never saw the inside of the house, never went in her garage, did some work at the city and made a massive profit as a flixer. And what I learned from that, though, is it's not necessarily a bad thing to do a notice of default search, get that list, and then drive by them and then see which ones have better zones. So you can drive by them, or you can just take a look on the aerial maps that we just showed you. You put the address in, it pulls you right there, and you just ask yourself, is that an older home, bigger lot type of area I'm looking for? And then you go knock that door. And the reason that's a really killer aspect right there is that's a non-competing mindset in a competing thing. There's a lot of people that knock on that door, but you would probably be able to offer a lot more money if somebody was going to buy that house. Most of them want to try and buy it at 50, 60 cents on the dollar, quick closing, cash, and then they want to fix it up, carpet and paint, and then sell it and see if they can break even or make a profit. Now, if I come along and I'm going to do a use change, I can pay a lot more for that property. And when that lady was done yelling at us, we just said, "Hey, what are people offering you? 80, 90,000. How much do you want?" She told us how much she wanted. I said, "Okay, how about we write an offer? How quick do you need to close?" And off we went. She was thrilled to death. Competing method in the fact that we went to her with a different approach. Now, it was a competing method in that that's how we found the property, a way that everybody uses. So these MLS is a competing method, but it's a non-competing approach, and we're going to use these words differently. So get those searches set up. And again, we want to find distressed properties with all of these things here. Now, the funny thing was, as I drove home a different way from my city, or from the city of Pleasant Grove to my home, drove a different way, and I saw another lot that was just fantastic. Now, this was, I just had to laugh out loud. On a major street, big lot, fenced in, and it had a small shed in the back, and that was it. And I can imagine this guy has gotten lots and lots of phone calls. It's on a major thoroughfare in a great industrial commercial area. A lot of different businesses want to go there. And I looked at it and thought it was a great property, but I noticed as I got closer, there was a big sign, probably 3 feet by 4 feet or 4 feet by 5 feet, attached to the fence in front, that just said, "I do not want to sell!" exclamation point. I mean, I laughed at that because I can imagine how many times that guy's gotten called over the years. He just got sick of it. So he put a sign on his property that said, "I do not want to sell." And it really tempted me to call him and say, "Hey, I noticed your property. Are you interested in selling?" Just to get a chuckle for myself and see if the guy would probably yell at me. And the funny part is sometimes those guys are the guys you can talk into it. And he goes, "I know, I'm just kidding. I understand. I saw your sign. Is there anyone else in the area that would want to do that? Your property would be great. I'd love to partner with property owners. There's some really cool things we could do there. Gosh, I could show you how to do some investing. Most people are just calling you to buy your property. I'd love to partner. You know, we could do some great deal, and whatever you think your property's worth, we could make you a lot more money." And it's interesting how, again, I'm taking a different approach with a guy than everyone else. That's a non-competing approach. And a lot of times those guys say, "Well, gosh, I always wanted more money for my property, and that's maybe a way we could do it." And so that's it. That's a property that gets a lot of traffic. Now, the question I'd ask you is, how many people drive the street one street over? All the people that called on that property right there, I would guess that it's less than 40% go to the second street over, and less than 10% that get over 3 streets that have the same zoning. Now, they didn't have the frontage that this guy had, but it had the zoning and it had the general location, and it would have a much lower sales price. So again, get out there, start doing stuff. And just because a guy has a sign on his property, I am not interested in selling, I call him and say, hey, are you interested in partnering? Well, what do you mean? Well, let's develop the property. Let's do some great things here. You know how many times we've had deals where we've gone in and we set up a deal like that? You know how easy it would be to put in 5 shops there, industrial commercial shops, where they could have, for example, an office in the front, a warehouse in the back, and do a row of 5 of them. We could determine what this guy's value of his property was, and maybe there's 5 and he keeps 2 and we sell 1 and I keep the other 2. Or he keeps 2, we sell 2, and I keep 1, and his are free and clear. The 2 in the middle are sold, and mine free and clear on the end, and he ends up in a better situation than he was in before. Nobody's calling him and having that conversation with him. Nobody is. So take a different mindset. Now, again, this is some of this easy stuff here on this list. Boarded up homes, broken windows, weeds, dead grass, cars on blocks. If somebody mows their lawn and finds a car, a full-size car that they had forgotten about, that might be a distressed area right there. So you want to take a look at that in those types of areas. I had a guy come to one of my classes, and he raised his hand in the first half of the first day. This was in Washington, and he goes, well, I drive by a home, and for the last couple of years, they've had a washer and dryer in the front yard. Would you consider that distressed? I go, a washer and dryer in the front yard? I go, yeah, that's absolutely distressed. So we went and talked to him that night. Guy was interested in selling. And again, people that don't take care of their properties are typically excited about getting an offer, because that's money to them. And it oftentimes, and I don't mean to sound condescending with what I'm about to say here, but a lot of times I can tell you over the years how many people, like this lady that we went and screamed and yelled us on the notice of default list, her home was in horrible repair. She sold her house and got herself into a much better situation than what she was in, and took care of that other situation better. One of the things that our company preaches, wealth follows worth. Our company name is Wealth Follows Worth. Until you have true worth, you're not going to have true wealth. Just, you have to change your worth, your inside worth, your knowledge. There's a lot of things that go into that. And in getting out of a negative situation, what we see is that what's around us in our lives is harmoniously parallel to or congruent with how we feel about ourselves on the inside. So if we feel like I'm a bad person, then I probably have bad things around me. I don't take care of things. If I feel like I'm broken down, I'm beaten down, I'm a bad person, then I'm going to bet you my house looks broken down, my car looks broken down, my life looks broken down. So those things run harmoniously. You want to find those things. Appliances in the yard, so that's kind of a funny one, but you'd be surprised how many times I've seen that. I've even seen a few where somebody had a random appliance in the front yard, and it wasn't in a planter box by intent. It was just sitting there, and someone planted a plant in it and ended up using it as a pot, which was hilarious. So a full mailbox, empty mailbox. Now these are ones, don't go open in mailboxes, but if you see ones that are stuffed and those types of things, you can take a look at that. Piles of newspapers. This is one that's getting less and less as more people don't subscribe to the newspaper anymore. But again, the first house that jumped out at me in this neighborhood yesterday after I started seeing these big lots was a no trespassing. And why would someone have a no trespassing sign on their house? And the fact of the matter was, they've had trespassing problems because there's no one there. People don't generally trespass. So any type of notice that I see, the variance notice, any of these things are going to be great things. So the stressed properties, again, utilities are always turned off. And you know what? You're not going to know that if you don't go at different times. You're going to drive through these neighborhoods early in the morning. You're going to drive through midday. You're going to drive through at night. You're going to drive through when it's dark, just to see. I'll drive neighborhoods just to see if the lights are on or off. And then I'll knock the neighbors and say, hey, who lives over here? The lights are never on. I wondered if that was a vacant house. I'd love to buy it and fix it up and make your neighborhood nicer. So the lights are always on, lights are always off, and you use those door knocking techniques that we've talked about in class, the door knocking questions. Blinds are always open or shut. You really have to pay attention to these things. Take some notes. Have your area of expertise book with you. Dilapidated roof, the holes in the walls. True story. This is hilarious. We were driving through a neighborhood one time, and we looked down into a short subdivision, into a short cul-de-sac, and there was a big blue tarp on somebody's roof. It looked like about an 8-foot by 10-foot tarp with rocks on the corners. and it was raining terribly. So I thought, gosh, that tarp's got to be up there because there's a hole in the roof. Well, we go in and knock on the door, and this little boy comes to the door. He must have been 8 or 10. And I asked him, "Hey, is your mom and dad home?" And he goes, "No." I go, "But the older brother came to the door, must have been 18 or 19. I said, "Hey, we're in the area looking for distress homes." Now, the funny part about this is the tarp was on the roof because there was a hole. And in the middle of this rainstorm, they got pots all around this area catching the dripping water. And it's almost raining inside the living room as much as it's raining outside. And I say to the 18, 19-year-old, "Hey, do you know anybody in the area that has a distressed property, that has a property that's not real in the best shape, that might need some help and might be interested in selling, something that might need some work? We like to buy properties and fix them up." And he goes, "No, we don't have, I don't know anybody like that. I don't know anybody in that situation." Now, again, I give him credit because I give him a little bit of slack because he's 18 or 19 and he is not the owner of the property. But I'm watching a waterfall in his family room. So I would have come back to that property had it been in a better zone with a bigger lot, et cetera, et cetera. I just happened to notice a blue tarp. And when I see something like that, I stop and talk. I stop and talk to them. So holes in the walls, dilapidated roofs, for sale by owners, for rents. Again, out of area phone numbers. And this is getting less and less these days because people have cell phones that live in areas that they used to live somewhere else and they carry their number with them. Back in the day, even just a few years ago, if you had a sign that had for example, a California prefix on it or some other place, and it was on a sign, you thought, okay, somebody in California owns this property. Not necessarily the case, and they live in California. Not necessarily the case now, but I still call those numbers. So the vacant properties, the notice of defaults, the condemned properties, again, get into your city, ask, is there a condemned list? If they say no, guess what? There is a condemned list. Ask who they would get. Okay, I know properties in this area get condemned. Who does that? Is it health department? Is it the county? I promise you guys, there's lists of properties that get shut down or threatened to shut down, and they're out there. So you just got to find out where they're at. And some of them can be fantastic deals because if the county shuts it down and takes it back through an eminent domain process or another issue based on a health issue, a lot of times those properties just get bulldozed and they sit there for years, and you can get them for 40, 50, 60 cents on the dollar. And a lot of them, because they're in bad shape, if you go into the city after you find that list and say, "Hey, property, what incentives will you give me to fix this property?" the city is generally going to be pretty excited about getting something done there because it's a bad property. It's a great opportunity for the city to improve what it is that they're taking a peek at. So again, we've got some great stuff there. Great stuff there. Now, the other thing that we want to do is we want to get that set up properly for you and get that going. The condemned properties, the health department list, great stuff there. So again, we're finding distressed property. The other thing we want to do is find distressed sellers. And we've kind of talked about this a little bit. Finding the distressed sellers, if you want to work bankruptcy lists, I can't tell you how many times it's a huge percentage. And I don't have a number, so I'm not going to just randomly quote one. But a huge percentage of divorces, the judge orders the sale of the property, and people split the money. And this is a great one if you work with law firms and say, "Hey, you don't have to do anything here, but get this done and get it done right." So great stuff there. Bankruptcies are great because, again, people often lose their homes. Divorce is great. I talk to law firms all the time. "Hey, can you just give somebody a note if they have to sell their home? I'm interested in purchasing it." And here's one of the reasons that works. And I love the death issue as well. And here's why. We'll talk about divorce and death. If, let's say, a divorce has a home sale and the house has $100,000 in equity in it, the judge orders, "Hey, you got to sell the house and split the equity evenly." So after expenses and after issues and everything else, there's $100,000 left, and each of them get to split $100,000, $50,000 each. Now, a lot of times there's a lot of stress and issue that they just want to dump the house. And they're willing, because they're not each getting 100 and taking 50,000 instead of 100. If each of them took 40,000 instead of 50,000, which isn't a huge deal to somebody typically when they're in a divorce situation, that's a $20,000 difference for you. So that's an interesting one. I've seen deals in death, for example, where I talk to heirs and the property is owned by heirs It's through probate. You want to make sure that's done. Well, it could be in a family trust, so probate had a different issue there. But the death, say I've seen where there's as many as 6 heirs. If there's $100,000 and there's 6 heirs, that's going to be $15,000, $16,000 a person. Now, if you come down to 80,000, that's going to be 12 or 13,000 a person. It's not a huge drop in what people are taking if there's a discount to get something sold. So really cool stuff that way. So take a look at the vacancies in properties. I love for sell by owners. I love because for sell by owners oftentimes don't know what they have, and they certainly don't know about higher and better uses. I would say, just in my own personal opinion, 75% of for sell by owners are overpriced current use. So if I can get in there and talk them into a good price and they have higher and better use, we don't even have to discuss that issue necessarily. Now, if you have a license property, even if you're not representing them, make sure your disclosures are correct. Make sure those are done correctly. So foreclosures, notice the defaults. These lists with these people, if they're great people with great areas, great issues, they're going to be fantastic in that regard. So loss of jobs, poor property management. Gosh, I can't tell you how many times we've done well talking to property management companies and saying, hey, if you know somebody that's interested in selling, I'm interested in talking to them. We'll cut you a referral fee. Some of these property managers will give you names and lists of people to talk to. A lot of times they try to do that on their own, so you have to find the right companies. But there's a couple of property management companies where they've said they wouldn't give us any information. I just go, who do you want to not represent anymore? Who's your hardest sellers that you're dealing with? Or property owners, and we'll call those guys and ask them if they're interested in selling. So find those distressed sellers, find those issues, find that information, and get serious about this stuff right here. Now, this leads us into the deal evaluation overview, and this will be the start of next week. So what I'm going to do is give you some great information here. Again, let's go back through this real quickly. Spent a lot of good time on some information today for non-competing and competing methods. Again, competing method is you're doing the same thing everyone else is doing. Now, if you like competing with other people, if you like fighting over properties, if you like doing things the way you've been doing them, hey, knock yourself out. I prefer non-competing methods, like the couple of examples I gave you today on just recent stuff as recent as yesterday and a couple of weeks ago in Las Vegas and Southern California. We've got great opportunities that way. So a competing method, again, is what everyone else is doing. A non-competing method is what other people aren't doing. A perfect example is that nice lot in that great industrial commercial area. Guy had gotten so many phone calls, he actually put a sign up that said, I'm not interested in selling, because to stop some of the sales. Now, there's probably a lot of guys that don't even drive by that property. They look at the aerial views and call them anyway. But for me, that's a competing method in just driving down a major thoroughfare and noticing a big property. Now, the non-competing approach is calling off from a partnership, calling off from, hey, what's your property worth? What if you got to keep the property and we made it worth more money for you? And you were an investor in it, and we built out something, and you got some units, and we might only have 2 of 5 or 6 units on the lot. But what if those 2 units were worth more than his land and produce income? I tell you, that lot sitting there with that old building on the back wasn't producing him any income, not any revenue. So it could dramatically change his situation. So use competing and non-competing methods. It's going to be an area of expertise. We're going to talk about that. Get your MLS searches done. If you're not a realtor, then find one that will put some searches together for you. There's lots of people that are excited about doing that, because that's a really cool way to do that. So get that done. So we're going to talk about that. Now, next week, we're going to talk about deal evaluation and perhaps a little bit about the area of expertise that we've got going here. So I'm going to send you an email that'll have some homework. I want you to watch for those emails. If you're watching this live, we'll do that. If not, obviously, I'm not going to say if you watch this later, you probably will have already gotten the email. Let's get excited, guys. Let's do some great things. There's some great opportunities here. And I don't want to say this to be hurtful, but when we talk about finding distressed people, distressed properties, look in the mirror. You're distressed. One of the reasons you came to this camp is because you wanted to be different. You wanted something to be different about your life. The first distressed person you should find is yourself. And we make you get out of that distress by creating knowing the foundation of success, creating a powerful red button statement, taking that red button statement, applying it so that it moves you, and then we're going to start finding properties. And I want to reiterate this. I've not met an investor yet. I have not met one investor yet that has the ability to find amazing properties and quit the business and just left. Some guys, life happens and different things that way. If you remember in the property bust, this guy I talked to, one of the reasons he had slowed down is two things. His business blew up and he was doing really well with that. But secondly, he got caught. He said yesterday, Mike, when the market crashed here in Southern California, and guys, it didn't crash in Utah like it did in Southern California. There's properties in Southern California that went to half in a year or two, and then it stayed down. He goes, Mike, I had 6 properties under contract that all had higher and better uses that were going to be fantastic deals. And I ended up getting out of all 6 of them because I was really nervous about how far the drop was going to go. And it kind of took the wind out of his sails. And I'll teach you in a bad market how to still do fantastic things and make lots of money, because in a down market, there's great options. But really, when there's a 40-50% drop in 1 to 2 years, that's tough. That's a tough one. But we can still be profitable if we have great benefits. And again, some of the things that happen in the down market, you might say, well, gosh, I shouldn't do anything there. Well, no, that's not necessarily true. If you're in a falling market and you cancel that contract and say, the price is dropping too much, I'll get back with you in a few months, and you go back in and get a slightly better thing. The other thing that changes there is there's less people you're fighting against. There's less work. There's less business. There's less. The seller financing becomes better. Terms become better. Raising capital becomes better. The other thing that's better is contractors. Man, their prices drop significantly. If there's no build jobs, if there's no new subdivisions, if properties are falling, nobody's got work. These builders will build for a much, much less expensive amount of money. Supplies drop, everything drops. So you just got to play your cards right and time it right, and then the highest and best use there's still typically big enough profits to make sure that you'll be profitable. So find those distressed sellers. Don't you be a distressed person. Get your area of expertise started. Get the campaigns going here where we're looking at properties, and then shoot me a call, shoot me an email if you got a property you want to take a peek at with me, and I'd love to do that. So have a wonderful day, guys. It's been a pleasure speaking with you. And that's the end of today's call. So we will talk to you later, and we'll see you soon.